welcome to Behind the Scenes. I am your host, Hector Montalvo. This show is dedicated to asking tough questions for you, the viewers. We bring you their responses, and we let you decide. Joining us here today at our MCTV studios, we're honored to be sitting with no other than the #1 attorney in my book, Mr. Anthony Defugia. Mr. Defugia, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Hector. I'm always happy to be here for lots of reasons. I always learn something with you. Okay.
It's great to have you.
Thank you.
You know, we've been reading a lot of and hearing in the news lately about solicitors. And just wanted to find out from you real quickly, what's the difference between an attorney and a solicitor?
Well, it goes back to English common law, and that's the 1500s. You have two categories in England. A barrister, which is a guy that goes to court and does his thing in front of juries, and a solicitor who stays home generally or goes to a lower court. And they are attorneys both. The United States does not have that distinction, so everybody's an attorney. That goes across the world. I mean, for example, in South America, being an attorney, you're called doctor, because you do receive a JD, Doctor of Jurisprudence degree. But here they call each other attorneys, and that's the end of that, but not much.
So if you're a salesperson, can you also be considered a solicitor as well?
Yeah, you can be soliciting for sales, of course.
Or votes if you're a politician.
Absolutely. That's the word itself, solicit.
Now, to be a solicitor in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, let's say for a city versus a town, what qualifications must one have to become a solicitor?
That's a good question, because the first primary thing is you have to be a lawyer. So we have to say city solicitor or town solicitor rather than a salesman solicitor. Okay, so we got that straight. You have to be able to practice in front of a court. To do that, you have to be an attorney and somebody who's in good standing, etc. That's that easy.
So is there a particular practice that you must have in order to be considered a solicitor?
Know the right political parties to get appointed a solicitor. It's a very political thing. I mean, let's be honest about it. If you know the right person in the right city or town, you get appointed. And generally speaking, the city council or the board of selectmen would have something to say about it because they pass on the budget. But the primary person making the appointment is the one that's going to be in charge. So it's politics. There's no doubt about it. And time.
So when you say in charge, I know here in Methuen, and I know also in Lawrence as well, that the solicitors are hired by the city councilors. When you say the person in charge, in most cities and towns, the person in charge is either the mayor or the town selectman. Is there a difference there as to who's in charge?
Sure.
It is.
Well, the difference is, for example, in the city of Lawrence, I believe that the mayor makes the recommendation and that the terms and conditions are usually set out. The city council would have to approve it because it's an expenditure. So the process is similar. However, the duties might be different. For example, you should defend the town against liability, review contracts, the business dealings, etc., all that kind of stuff. But if you're incompetent, you get thrown out.
Correct. Now, when we hear about incompetency all over, solicitors working throughout the cities of in Massachusetts, I know that there's one here in the city of Lawrence that just recently came to light, where a chief of police had filed a complaint against one of their solicitors for a violation that the chief felt that must be reported. Are you aware of that type of situation?
Well, who isn't? That lives in the Merrimack Valley. I mean, it's kind of unusual, but you know, you got to give Chief Romero credit. The truth is that he's on the line, and if he's unhappy with what the lawyer did in this case, then he should have a right to say what he wants to say and do what he wants to do. I don't want to expand that, except you ask the questions and I'll answer them. But what the city solicitor did in that case is he should have at least, like any other attorney, talk to your client first, get an assent, and don't remove a motion that could be successful, especially with prejudice.
Now, the client would actually be considered the person in charge, whether it's the mayor or the city councilors, or is it the people because they're representing the towns and the cities?
Well, ultimately it's the people, of course, ultimately. But they make that decision by delegating that decision during the course of an election, so that the people say, I want this group, Johnny Jones, Jose Pereira, or whatever, to be members of the city council. So as such, the people have given them authority, which is the whole basis of any legislative or city action. That's democracy, I guess.
Now, are city solicitors required to have like a bond, sort of like lawyers do? Because I understand lawyers have bonds.
Well, I think you mean liability insurance.
Correct.
Okay. I don't know that. I'll be very frank with you. I don't have an answer to that. If I were a city solicitor, and under no circumstances do I want to be one, okay, let's get that straight, I would just protect myself and have it anyway, as any attorney should have, because people make mistakes. And you multiply a mistake if you're a lawyer if you cover it up. And I think that what the chief was saying, Chief Romero was saying, was, why didn't you tell me? And why are you denying my rights? We talked about this before. He has other remedies. The chief does, obviously. He could get that changed.
Right. So, in most cities and towns, I've noticed that when I looked up on the at the bar's website, under the bond, it specifically addresses the attorneys. But in some cities, the bondholder is actually the city.
It may be.
So it's okay for...
They could be. They could be self-insurers, sure, under limited circumstances. Not a wise thing to do, because you realize the city has a certain amount of immunity. So we have to consider that. I mean, for example, churches and charities have immunity. They have limits. You can't sue a charity for more than $20,000 here. But most charities or churches have insurance that goes beyond that, so they're not denying somebody getting paid for somebody doing something wrong within the church. Same's true with the city or town.
So how can the people hold a solicitor or any solicitor accountable for, let's say, incompetent or violations of ethical laws where government usually don't want to even entertain that?
They simply elect strong people in the city council and board of selectmen and take them to task.
So the people would have to actually show how upset they are.
Well, the people are kind of interesting, when you think about it, per se. We're in a very interesting situation economically and politically right now. And when you consider the fact that people now are coming back, you got the Tea Party group, which in my opinion, I don't mind telling you, I call them wingnuts. Because, but they have a right to say what they're saying. And how they're changing it is by getting people out of office that don't agree with them legally, politically, and most important, religiously. And that's sad that they bring that into play.
Yeah, it is sad.
But the people have to come back in. And look what's happening in Lawrence with Mayor Latigua. That recall, that's a serious matter. And people have to consider that. You lead by example.
Yeah, and it's interesting that did come up, but there hasn't been any backing with the people actually bringing those forward,
I don't really know that.
Well, we haven't at least read about it or seen it in the papers or anything like that.
Recently, you're right. I agree with that. But I think they're under a deadline, aren't they, as to when they're going to file the necessary signatures?
Right. They're supposed to have like maybe 5,000 signatures and bring it into the city clerk.
At first, when you think about Latigua, and he could have done so many great things. I mean, it was really a beginning. And I'm not sure, and I know we're digressing. I don't live in Lawrence anymore, but certainly I have a vested interest in Lawrence and in the Merrimack Valley. But some of the things that he seems to be embroiled in, okay, and I don't want to make the analogy, similarly, Obama did it in his first year. I mean, why in God's name would Obama come on national TV and get upset because one of his buddies in Cambridge, who happened to be a Harvard professor, got arrested? Was he just coming back and saying, you know, I believe him? And then obviously that beer conference. Well, I think Obama has grown, okay? I think Latigua should take a page out of Obama. I don't mind telling you that. Because if you see, you know, if you analyze what Obama has done in the past, his first term, and compare to what he's doing now, you see a different person. And I don't mind telling you, in my opinion, Obama is probably one of the brightest presidents we've ever had. And he got stuck with a mess. But he's learned. And I hope Latigua somehow learns before it's too late.
It's kind of interesting because you hear also about Lantigua walking into a police department with a city solicitor. Again, if the city solicitor is not working for that actual mayor and he's actually working for the people, should a solicitor be walking in with a mayor to a courthouse to defend him on a particular case, or are they strictly required to protect the city?
You know something, Hector, that is a great question because you have an implicit conflict here. Who are you working for, city solicitor? You're working for the people, or you're working for the man in charge right now, the mayor? Okay? I don't know the answer to that. I think that they certainly have to tread lightly.
So besides the people actually using their power to vote for these, because I don't believe that the people have the right to vote for a solicitor. I think that would be handled by the city councilors or the administration.
Correct.
If a person or the people object to a particular solicitor, what steps can they take to basically
petition? In other words, bring petitions in, go to the city councilors, make phone calls, take ads out in the paper, do anything you got to do in order to put pressure on. Not unusual. Not unusual at all.
I know that here in Methuen, there was a local city council meeting, and there's also an issue with the solicitor in Methuen as well that ended up costing the taxpayers an additional $120,000. And, you know, there was a question asked by a city council member in regards to an affidavit that was filed in the court.
We're talking about Peter McQuillan, of course.
Yes, yeah, I didn't want to mention the solicitor's name, but yeah, we were talking about that.
Everybody knows about it.
Well, true, you know. But what I find interesting in the affidavit, but you know what I want to do? I want to show this tape real quick, and I just want to come back and ask you the question. So let's roll the tape of the city council meeting that just happened.
One more question. The the 250,000 to 300,000 that was quoted in the paper, and I will say that part of the reason why I would not go into executive session is because I felt as though this was all out in the open and everybody should be aware, and somebody just said it from the audience, transparency and openness. Was this a fictitious price that we've read in the paper? Who gave that to the Tribune?
You have to ask the Tribune.
I mean, a fictitious price of $250,000 and $300,000. Somebody had to give them this price.
Didn't come from the city hall.
Wow.
So you have to. Maybe JJ could be able to tell you.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, now that you saw that video, the affidavit was filed back on April 7th of 2011. And in the actual affidavit, it does speak about the $250,000 to $300,000. Being that the city councilors did not know about that particular number, and the solicitor's response was, you have to ask the Eagle Tribune, who was the one that published it. Should the city councilors be asking that type of question, or should they have known by their city councilor that this is what they were going to be filing?
Well, I got to give you credit again, Hector. You get to the meat and potatoes of the issue, don't you? Well, I think like any other client, for God's sakes, if you have a resolution on a case, a settlement, okay? Whether it's an auto accident, a divorce case, a contract case, or a city case, or an employment case, the least you do is talk to your client and say, look, we have an offer here. An attorney should not be able to, and this is what troubled me about that tape, should not be able to bind the client without first getting approval by the client. Now, if you come into my office, I don't care what case it is, you get a fee agreement. And when we take money in for you, it has to go into an escrow account. And the client has to sign off that they agree with the amount, the deductions, and they have a net figure. The city council and the people of Methuen certainly were entitled to know that before any attorney would agree to a settlement that appears to be ambiguous. And it's obviously ambiguous. And you know, the $250,000 to $300,000, you know, I think Peter was playing cute. There's no doubt about it. He could have answered the question clearly. Look at the affidavit. You got it. Why hide it?
And a response from the chairman of the city council, which basically the solicitor worked for the chairman of the city council, or the city councilors. The response was it didn't come from anyone from the city.
Well, that says something. I mean, the city is left with a couple of choices here. I think they may have worked this problem out because no one wanted to get embarrassed. But the city could have gone to another attorney and said, look, is this fair? Is this right? Is the cost okay? So the city can say, we never agreed to that. Now you get into something else that's a problem. And that is, if two parties in a case agree to settle, okay, ostensibly you're giving the attorney the authority to do it, and they can enforce the settlement, per se. So that the dilemma was obvious, and it was something that was created by, quite frankly, attorneys that were not really paying attention.
Yeah, it just goes to show the, you know, is it incompetency or is it
That's
don't
a good
care?
question. But that's a good question you have. I wonder if the people of the town of Methuen, which is really a city, which always cracks me up, when you think about it, would they be able to bring a claim against the city solicitor's insurance company?
Right, and if in the website it says that the city of Methuen are the bondholders, so I think that the people would be actually suing the city of Methuen. They'd be suing themselves versus going after the actual individual that caused.
Well, they're suing Peter McQuillan individually. And the claim is that he did not act with due diligence and did not fill the criteria of what a lawyer should do. And so the claim would be against him, then he would then turn it over to his insurance company if he has it. If he doesn't,
some ethical violations as far as being able to approach a foreperson of a jury. Are attorneys allowed to contact a foreperson or a member of the jury, or do they need permission from the actual court in order for them to do that?
That's, again, you must be doing your homework, Hector. I'm really impressed. Well, in the olden days, you could call up a juror, but case decisions within the last 30, 40 years says a lawyer should not do that, because by doing that, you destroy the jury process.
Can that be considered jury tampering as well, or?
Yeah, you're stretching it, but it's not necessarily tampering. It's making it uncomfortable to serve on the jury, because once the case is over, it's over. But, okay? You need permission of the court before you talk to any member of the jury. And if you don't get permission of the court, that may be an action brought before the Board of Bar Overseers.
And the Bar of Overseers, if you can tell us, what type of complaints do they handle? Do they deal with rules of professional misconduct by attorneys? And what are some of those rules of professional misconduct?
Well, let's go backwards for a minute.
Yeah.
The Board of Bar Overseers was set up in the state of Massachusetts because each state is different, and it's part of a policing process in which a citizen or anybody can bring a complaint, okay? So in the case of talking to members of the jury, if the judge wasn't satisfied, he can report that lawyer to the Board of Bar Overseers, okay? And that means anybody can do it. So now the Board of Bar Overseers will conduct an investigation. Was there a violation of the canons of ethics, okay? Now, clearly, the canons of ethics, and they're all spelled out. There's no secrets here, okay? And one is you don't play with clients' money. That's clear. One is due diligence. One's dealing with conflict, if you have competing interests. Those are all of the examples. Generally, lawyers get in trouble when they start taking clients' money for their own use, which they can't do. Okay, but it's basically a good thing. You have to register every year, and by doing that, they can lift your license, but they themselves cannot. They have to make a recommendation to the Supreme Court of the state and say, we want this guy disbarred.
So now, once they file a complaint, is it an anonymous complaint so the people, they don't know who filed the complaint? How does...
Oh, no. The Board of Bar Overseers requires that you sign it. If you complain against the lawyer, you've got to sign it. They're not going to deal with no names. Whether or not it becomes private at that point is the next question. In the Romero case, Romero made it public before he did it, which he has a right to do.
Right.
However, it puts certainly Bodie in trouble because he cannot respond publicly.
Correct.
So he had to make no comment in that situation, but he's got his problems before the Board of Bar Overseers.
I just want to remind the viewers, you are watching Behind the Scenes. I am your host, Hector Montalvo. We're joined in studio today with no other than attorney Anthony DeFusia, talking about solicitors, what are the roles of a solicitor, and what qualifications a solicitor must have. Mr. DeFusia, I just wanted to ask you, in looking at a lot of attorneys' records throughout the Commonwealth, we see that attorneys are now being convicted of
fraud.
Fraud. They're being convicted of drinking and driving, and so on. I looked at your record, and you are clean. You have zero driving without intoxication, and so on. How do you do it? What should other attorneys be?
Well, I think your record's pretty good too, Hector. I don't think there's any special category, okay? I mean, there's laws that are there. Abide by the laws. Just, you don't have to break the rules, okay? I mean, it's too bad that these lawyers are getting in trouble, but it's a good thing, too, because nobody's above the law. I mean, look at that individual who was going to be president of France. He has his problems.
He does now.
Which is kind of obvious. So we're no different. Doctors get in trouble. For God's sakes, priests get in trouble. Ministers get in trouble. Who doesn't get in trouble? But, I think the normal, average, ordinary person, he goes by the rules. He doesn't drink and drive. He doesn't steal from anybody. He doesn't want to go out and hurt anybody. And I think most of us, I think we are. The majority of people are good people. You do have bad apples every place.
Now, you're also a state representative for...
No, I get thrown out.
Did you?
Yeah.
You got... So you...
No, I get thrown out in the primary because I guess I'm too liberal. And they're probably right. Because, right from the sense that politically, I certainly don't identify with the ultra-Whignite conservatives. And I was a moderate Republican. But the party right now has gone way over to the right, which to me is ridiculous. And I don't mind saying that. Can I expand on that for a second?
Go ahead.
Very interesting HBO special on that people should look at, and it's with Michael Moore, who is a radical. Everybody knows he's a radical, right? But he, during that special he came on with, I think within last year, it's the dealing with capitalism, love affair of capitalism, whatever. He had a record of Franklin Delano Roosevelt 2 months before he died, in which Franklin Delano Roosevelt was saying that we should have another Bill of Rights. And he mentioned workers' rights, health care, no discrimination. Now remember, you're talking about 1945-46. And he said, and Roosevelt said at the time, that all of the countries that we've conquered, when they have a democracy, I want to make sure in their constitution, okay, this is in the 40s now, that equal rights for everybody, race, religion, color, and all that good stuff, workers' rights, health care. Now, every one of the countries, Italy, Germany, and Japan, in their constitution, they protect the worker, individual rights, discrimination. In fact, Italy was the first country that gave women, after World War II, that right. And think about it. And that's why somebody like, somebody that is saying, yeah, I believe in those principles, will have problems. And I don't mind telling you, I think that I'm a Roosevelt Democrat. And I think the ball was picked up by people like John F. Kennedy, and also, believe it or not, Eisenhower and Lyndon Johnson, and when you're talking about civil rights. And guess what? Finally, the barrier was broken. You have a decent man being president.
Well, we'll see. Just want to remind the viewers, this is Behind the Scenes. I am your host, Hector Montalvo. If you have a question that you want us to ask legal representation or government official, drop us an email at theHectorMontalvoShow@yahoo.com. You can also visit us at Facebook/Behind the Scenes with Hector Montalvo. Mr. DeFuture, we have 2 minutes left.
2 minutes?
Yeah,
you mean
time
we
flies.
blow 30 minutes
Time
already?
flies really quick.
Okay.
You know, I noticed that you have a high-tech CIA type of professional building, unlike some other lawyers that we may know of. Tell us real quickly, what type of practices can people reach out to you for if they need assistance? What practice law do you do? What do you cover?
Well, we're basically litigators, which means we go to court and, you know, we bring it to a conclusion. But you got to understand, in order to get into court, I guess with the barristers, resolution and solving something comes first, and the only way you can solve something is by being well prepared. Okay, so we generally take on cases like you know, personal injury, auto accidents, workman's comp, employment cases, contract cases, some divorces, depending on the nature of the divorce. We do a lot of employment law and the commercial litigation. But generally speaking, it's, you know, we have 5 lawyers on staff. We have another 5 of counsel, and we're pretty well spread out. So we're there. Thank you for calling us high-tech.
Yeah, well, you are high-tech. I was very impressed. I actually had a chance to go through your building. It's an elevator on the first floor, and you got a public library, not a public library, but a law library in there that's very professional.
It's old-fashioned.
Yeah.
I still like the books.
Well, you know, you do a pretty good job. And also, if any of the taxpayers or from any cities and towns that may have a problem with how solicitors are doing their job, or you know, because the city councilors or the administration fails to act on a constituent's request, can they contact you for assistance, and maybe you can represent the taxpayers? And
well, they can contact us, of course. You know, it doesn't mean that a lawyer is bound to take everything that comes in, but obviously we do a lot of some pro bono stuff. So you have to weigh the interest. For example, we're doing now Hillsdale Cemetery in Haverhill on a pro bono basis, because believe it or not, in that cemetery in Haverhill, we don't know who's buried there, and may have been some land taking, believe it or not, and it's one of the oldest cemeteries in the country. Civil War vets are in there. So I mean, that's an example where sometimes you're shoveling it. But if somebody calls, first they should call their own state rep and their own city councilor. But if you want to give us a call, you can call us.
quickly, your address and phone number for where your office is located.
Well, thank you. 302 Broadway, Methuen, and it's 687-1777. Nice
Great.
number. Hector, thank you for being my publicity agent.
Thank you, Attorney DeFugia. It was nice to have you. Again, I want to thank the crew at MCTV, the staff at MCTV, and I want to thank you at home for watching. Join us next time as we go behind the scenes to ask the tough questions, bring you their responses. We let you decide. Thank you for joining us.